Shalom, everybody, and welcome for a brand new series here at Avat International. Decoding Ovadiah and the Last Days is unlike any other teachings that I've done for you systematically. As you know, recently I've written to you this book, The Fall of Edom. This is a significant book that now made its way to English, Spanish, French, and now soon in Korean and many other languages. The first book in the series has been The New Hamas. This is a classic that I urge everybody to read. Both books are significant in understanding end time eschatology. And I know that everybody wants to know exactly where we're at in Acharit Hayamim. And this is why I've put this particular series for you. In Decoding Ovadiah and Acharit Hayamim, we are going to open up the Fall of Edom. And we're going to go through the prophet Obadiah, verse by verse. The title of the shiur today is going to be Awake. We are in Obadiah chapter 1, verse 1. So you can expect regularly to go with me through the entire book of Obadiah. Now, we have to understand, as we're going to learn today in this systematic course, that many of the things that are happening in the book of Obadiah chapter 1, which is, by the way, the only chapter in the book, are spoken by other prophets. And we're going to look at some cross sections of the book of Obadiah. Now, the first thing I would like to explain to you remember, because why Obadiah is so significant, is because Obadiah was not a Jew. At least he wasn't born a Jew. He was a convert, and he was an Edomite. And today we'll understand why this book is so important for the nations in the last days. As always, this teaching is given to you freely. Freely share it with others. And I hope that it will truly impact you. I would like to expand on some things I've written in the Fall of Edom, clarify some other things, and explain some of the difficult concepts around the chief commentator that we're going to look at, the Ramad, Rabbi Moshe David Valley. His full commentary is found in the book, The Fall of Edom. But we're going to pick up on some of the key pieces and understand them today. Even Ezra, to Abarbanel, and several other commentators in the context that you understand what and where we're at today. I like to start with the word of Abarbanel itself before we even touch this scripture, before we even touch Obadiah 1:1. Listen to what he says to us. He says, the words of the prophet Obadiah are one single prophecy only. Therefore, I haven't divided it into separate prophecies. This is something that we all have to understand, that the prophet Obadiah, and he was a prophet, wrote it as a single prophecy. And Obadiah chapter 1 goes along hand in hand with Psalm 83, Psalm chapter 2, Zechariah chapter 12, Jeremiah chapter 49. They all represent the same event. Ezekiel 38, they represent the same event from a different camera angle. The reason that the prophet Obadiah is so relevant to us today, because it's connecting quite powerfully with the word of Rav Shaul in Romans 11, as we're going to see today together. But before we get there, make yourself a note that this is indeed a single prophecy. What you read in 1:1, connecting to the very end. This entire thing represents one prophecy about Edom. The number one question that I'm asked again and again, I will say it, read the book. This series does not come to replace the book, but to explain a few key things. But the number one question that I have been asked is, who is Edom? Is Edom a nation? Is Edom a spirit? Is Edom a coalition of nations? We're going to understand it today as we dive into the fall of Edom. But the first question we have to ask, why in the Hebrew Tanakh we would have a book that is written by a convert? Why it is so significant? Listen to what the Ramad tells us in his commentary on Obadiah 1:1. He states, it is well known that Obadiah was an Edomite convert, which is why his prophecy pertains to the fall of the nations. The Ramad explained that the reason that it was given to Ovadiah can be understood by the Talmudic expression, and if you want to make a note and reference for further studies, it's in Sanhedrin 39b, which states, then from within the forest you will take the axe that will cut down the entire forest. The term nations literally means here Gentiles. I want you to listen again and understand this expression that is used from the Ramad, that within the forest you will take the axe. The axe here represent the prophecy. And it's not just a regular prophecy, it's called in Hebrew Nevuat Po'anut. Nevuat Zam, a prophecy of wrath. The other person, excuse me, who known by the Navi Zam, of prophet of wrath, is none other Jeremiah, which is interesting because the same language that is used here in Obadiah 1:1 is used in Jeremiah chapter 49. And a little bit later, we are going to examine it. But what is the meaning beyond the axe that will they will cut down the forest? It's mean that it has to be one of their very own, one from the nations who give the Nevuat Zam, the prophecy of wrath, to the nations. Now, this prophecy is starting with a true Zam, with a true warning. Now, I know that many of you have heard this, especially if you've been in the Messianic movement, that the term goy is a negative term. That, friends, is simply not true. And the reason I say that is because I want you to listen and pay attention to the way Ovadiah described the goyim in this case. In this passage that we are going to look today at, the key passage of Obadiah 1:1. Now, again, I want you to remember that only a non-Jew can speak like that to a non-Jewish crowd. And that's why God is giving him the spirit of prophecy to speak about those days. The days that I believe that we are living right now. The days before the judgment. Many of you are not Jewish, watch our channel faithfully. And you probably ask the question, what should we do as non-Jews in these last days? Today and throughout this series, you will get the answer of what God have you to do. And again, it's a prophecy of calamity against the nation. And this prophecy starts in such a way. Let's read together. חזון עובדיה, כה אמר אדוני השם לאדום, שמועה שמענו מאת אדוני, וציר בגויים שולח, קומו ונקומה עליה למלחמה. The vision of Obadiah. Thus says Adonai Elohim concerning Edom. We have heard a report from Adonai, and an envoy has been sent among the nations. Arise, Let us rise up against her in a battle. Well, this is a stunning verse that we've just read in Obadiah 1. First of all, it starts with the word chazon. The word chazon in Hebrew means forecast. A weatherman known by the name of Chazai. Chazon always speak about the future. And the very first question that we have to ask ourselves, does it indeed speak about Acharit Ayamim? Does it indeed speak about the last days? This is an important question. And as we're going to see in a minute, Abarbanel asked this as part of 6 different questions that he asked about Ovadiah chapter 1, verse 1. That was one of the 6 questions that he said we have to answer. And we will going to see the answer for that in a minute. Now, the other thing that we have to pay attention to is the word here, Hashem Adonai le'edom. Le'edom. This is a prophecy to Edom. And the question here, who is Edom? What Edom represent? And if all the Gentiles who are bad, who are part of Edom, why does it mention here in the text the envoy that has been sent to the nations? If you don't mind bringing this verse again, I want you to pay attention to what it says in the screen on the red. Throughout this series, whenever you see red in Hebrew, I want you to pay attention to. It says, Vetzir Bagoim. This word, tzir, is an important word. It's more than the word envoy. It represents some sort of ingathering that is going to be taking place. Now, this particular group have a task, and he says to them, rise up against her in battle. Now, the question that you have to ask yourself is, who is it speaking about? Does it truly speak about the nations that are going to take a war? And if it's the case, who is it that the nations are going to take war against? You can come back to me for a moment and understand this. That the word Tzir Bagoim, speaking about another set of Gentiles. The calling is within the Gentiles, to the Gentiles, to fight Edom, which is also Gentiles. This is important. This is significant. We have to make sure to understand that there is 2 different set of Gentiles who are going to be part of this war against Edom. There is the Gentile Edom, and there is an envoy Edom that is going to come against the Gentile Edom. You probably say, I don't understand it. This is confusing. In a minute, it will all make sense for you. Now remember, Abarbanel has told us that this particular prophecy is a prophecy that is a single prophecy. But the question is, are we sure that he's speaking about the end time in Acharit Hayamim? Let's turn together to Abarbanel. Itzhak Abarbanel, the following he says. It is impossible to say that he saw the destruction of Edom that occurred in the time of Nebuchadnezzar days, like what the Even Ezra writes, or that one that occurred in this time of Hyrcanus, Yochanan Hyrcanus days, because he says in order to cut off men from the mount of Esav, and also says there will be no remnant to Esav. And it is known that Nebuchadnezzar and the time of Hyrcanus destruction were not complete destruction. I want you to underline those notes. They were not complete destructions without survivors. So this proves that it is referred to a future time when they will be utterly destroyed without any remnant, when God redeem his people. You see, Abarbanel is giving us here an important clue. He said, yes, there's been partial destruction of Edom, but there has never been a complete destruction of Edom. Therefore, this particular prophecy cannot be taken and understood as a prophecy that already been fulfilled. It's one for the future. Well, is this prophecy for the future? Is a prophecy that will lead for the coming of the Messiah before the time of the Messiah? Listen to what Abarbanel says as he continues. Pay close attention to this. He says, and don't be surprised that he would prophesy about an event so far in the future, since Bilam, who came 300 years prior, also prophesies about the destruction of Edom. We read that in Numbers 24:18. Edom will be an inheritance, and its enemies will inherit Seir, which is the other name for Edom, and Israel will be triumphant, and Jacob will descend and destroy the remnant from the city, which refers to the future Edomites that are, here you go, take a breath, that are the Christian nations. And many prophets talk about the destruction of Edom. And in his opinion, there were 9 different prophecies about the destruction of Edom, or what he referred to Abarbanel, the destruction of Christianity. It's been given by Bilam, Ovadiah, Isaiah, Yoel, Amos, Yirmiyahu, Ezekiel, Malachi, David HaMelech in his Sefer Tehillim, and David HaMelech who lived in between Bilam and Ovadiah. What a shocking statement by Abarbanel, who equate Edom to Christianity. But wait a second. If he is equating Edom to Christianity, why are Gentiles are being called out of this system of Edom to fight Edom? This is an important question that we have to ask ourselves today. We must make a distinction between the system of Rome, that in Judaism, throughout the Mefarshanim, the commentators always refer to the system of Christianity, to a Christian itself, an individual Christian. The two are not the same. And please, do not respond to this video, think that I am against Christians. Chas v'chalila, God forbid. There are 2 different types of Gentiles in the world, and we have to consider that today. Again, this is the opinion of Abarbanel, and we must rectify it in the light of the spirit of the word here, Jeremiah and the others. Today we will look specifically at Jeremiah cross text, because it uses the same words of Obadiah 1:1. But we must keep today an open mind for God's plan for the Gentiles. I do believe that Obadiah wrote this book because he knew that there are plans for the nations, for the Gentiles in the last days. So is this prophecy for the future? Yes. Is it about Acharit Hayamim? Yes. Listen to Abarbanel as he continues. And he says, the prophecy of the downfall of Edom was repeated to the 9 prophets because God wanted the matter to be well known and not a hidden matter. And because it was commonly prophesied about, sometimes one prophet would borrow an earlier one words, which explain why Obadiah and Jeremiah language are literally almost identical. But Jeremiah add unto the words which is on prophecy. We have to understand that if a prophet He's repeat the words of another prophet. That's mean that he is doing it because it's something that want to be well known to us. So in this case, the same prophecy repeat 9 different times. This is something that we need to take into account. Edom will be destroyed. Wait, we will identify Edom and we will do it together. But we're seeing something interesting here in the text. We're seeing in the text that there is a group that is going to arise from within Edom. Within Edom. They're going to break out from within Edom. They're belonging to Edom. They've been consumed by Edom, but they're going to rise up to go to war from within this thing that is called Edom, that we are yet to define. And as a matter of fact, let's go to the next slide. Let's look at Obadiah 1:1 again. What are the words that are being repeated in the book of Jeremiah? You see them here on your text. Those are significant words that both Jeremiah and Ovadiah are telling us. We have heard a report from Adonai. Shmu'a shamanu me'et Adonai. Those 4 words are repeated. And this word shmu'a here in the text is very important. So I wanted to put a note on this expression. Shmu'a shamanu me'et Adonai. Okay? So what does it mean? You can come back to me. It means that somehow there is going to be something that is heard from inside the nations, from inside the camp, that is going to rattle the Gentiles. It's going to rattle them so much that they will be willing to fight a certain fight for the name of our God, for the name of God of Israel, which is incredible. They are Gentiles according to the flesh. Listen to what Abarbanel says on that in the same context. He says, the Radak says that there is that this is Ovadiah, meaning myself and the other prophets who discuss the destruction of Edom. This expression, Shmu'a Shamanu, we have all heard it. Who is the we here? The we is Jeremiah, the we is Amos, the we is all of them. Shmu'a Shamanu. We all want to. So you see, what's happening here is Amos, Jeremiah are now being piggybacked on Ovadiah, who say, hey, let me tell you already what is being revealed to the prophets, and let me reiterate it to you. That's why he used the plural word. He didn't say shama'ati. Shama'ati mean I have heard. Shamanu, we heard. The prophets of Israel is heard. And the Radak is telling us, indeed, he is repeating what all the prophets saying to us. Let's continue to read together. He says, the prophets, all the other prophets heard the destruction about Edom in those days. Now, it says there in the text, thus say Hashem, as if an envoy has been sent out among the nations to publicize this, so that all the nation will come to war against the land of Edom. Let's stop there. There is a call to the nations to come to fight against the land of Edom. Abarbanel says it's a physical land. But as you're going to see in a moment from the various other commentators, some did not believe that Edom is a physical land. Not the Radak and not the Ramad and not the Ramchal. They didn't believe that it's only a physical, but it's something else that we have to define. We have to know who is the enemy that we're fighting against. But here is the problem. And here Abarbanel. And anybody who say that the rabbi is dishonest do not know their heart. Their heart is always to seek the truth. At times they make mistakes, but their heart is to find the meaning beyond every word and letter of the Torah. And here, Abarbanel make this shocking statement. And he say, how is it possible that all the nation of the world will rise up without a reason to fight against Edom? And what is this envoy that was sent, and who is sent it? There is going to be an awakening within Edom to awaken, create an envoy, like a group, like a remnant that is going to come against Edom. And you say, how is it possible that they are going to be, the nations will be turning against the nations? You know, in Matthew chapter 24, Yeshua spoke about it, that nations will turn against nations. We see that in Sanhedrin 97. We see that in Tractate Sota. We see it in so many places. And at the end of the day, these nations turning against nations is a sign of the last days. Not just wars among nations, but a remnant that is going to turn to God to fight against Edom, which represent the nations. That is something that we have to consider. Now, the interesting thing is Edom, according to Abarbanel, represent Christianity as a whole. But how is it possible that Christians will turn against Christianity? Listen to what Abarbanel said. And again, I don't want to offend today anybody who is a Christian. But I will say that Christians, you have to choose. The time to choose is now. Let's conclude with Abarbanel and listen to what he says. The nation of Edom is the summation of the Christians. Summation of the Christian means Christianity that began with the Romans, who will be awoken to go up and conquer Jerusalem because it is holy for the religion. And Jesus is buried there. Isn't it amazing that he mentioned Jesus by name? I want you to understand this today. Just as it says, not all of Israel is Israel, not everybody who call on the name of Yeshua, who is a Gentile, is really truly a follower of Yeshua. Many call upon his name, and they do not represent Yeshua. In Zechariah chapter 12, we read that. In Psalm chapter 2, we read that the nations will come up against Jerusalem in these last days. And that is exactly the event that is going to take place. There is going to be an alliance among the nations to turn against Israel. On October the 7th, at the brink of Israel war right now, with Iran, with the Hezbollah, we are seeing the nations who are already turning against the nations. But as the war will intensify, the nation will take an even more serious stand against Israel and against the Jewish people. We must understand it. So when he say here summation of Christians, what does he mean by this? He mean by that Christianity, not Christians, but rather Christianity. What symbolizes Christianity? Maybe Catholicism. I don't want to speculate, but the system that is called Christianity will side up with the enemies of Israel. And we say Chas v'chalila, God forbid, may it's never happened. It's already happening when we divide the land. And many Christian nations, many Christians are standing in the side and standing on the sidelines in this conflict. You see, even Christianity as a whole will turn against Israel. As a matter of fact, let's go to the next slide because there is a good news here in the text. Look what it says there. It says, I have received tidings from God. And here it says in Hebrew, Vetzir bagoyim shaluach itkabtsu. And an envoy is sent out among the nation. This word, shaluach, is where we get the Hebrew word shaliach, emissary. Something will awake them. Something will get them up. And they will understand that the system that they are part of is a system that's looking to destroy Israel, looking to go and divide Jerusalem. How will they understand it? It's a mystery. Shaluach itkabtsu. They will ingathering. You see, there is going to be an ingathering. This ingathering have a name. It's the remnant. The ingathering here is the remnant church that is going to be established in the last days. We have to understand that there is going to be a remnant Christians who will divorce themselves from the system of Christianity. And who is the one who is gathering against Edom? Listen to what the Malbim he's telling us in his commentary. He says, now the prophets speak of the future. The tidings from the Lord is prophecy. The envoy within the Gentiles, oh my goodness, the envoy within the Gentiles prophesies of the envoy who is gathered against Edom. During Acharit Hayamim, here you go, Malbim said, this is the last days, the envoy of Edom will be great and mighty, to the point that many Goyim will have to fight a system that is called Rome, which is including Edom. In essence, what the Malbim is telling us here, that is going to be an envoy of wickedness, an envoy of righteousness among the Gentiles. Exactly what Yeshua is teaching us in Matthew chapter 25:32, when he says that in the last days there will be a great separation between the sheep and between the goat. And today we must understand that there are two envoys here. As we continue to this series, we will learn about the other envoy, the envoy of wickedness, the envoy of the system of Christianity. But there is going to be another envoy, an envoy of righteous Christians who will never, never sell Israel, to the point that they will have to go to war within the nations, within the church. And before you think that I tell you this today to frighten you and to alarm you, I am telling you today the great separation has begun already. We are noticing it, we are watching it in everything, in the nations, in politics, with wars, with our political views, with our moral views. Everything is being separated in those last days. The word that is used here in the text to describe this righteous envoy is the Hebrew word tzir bagoim. It's not so say tzir me'agoim, tzir bagoim. The letter bet, bagoim, something will enter into them. I do believe that this thing that is going to enter into them is none other than the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, who will awaken them. And a matter of fact, they will say, let us get up. Metzudat David and Metzudat Zion give us two principles of the righteous envoy. I want you today to ask yourself the question, do you possess those two things? Do you possess them, especially those who are not Jewish from the nations? Gentiles according to the flesh. Do you possess those things? Look with me together at Metzudat David and Zion. Metzudat David quotes in context Proverbs 25:13. You see, it says there, Inyan Shaliach Kmo Tzir Ne'eman. It is a person who receives an emissarial calling to be a faithful envoy. As it says in Proverbs 25:13, he is trusty messenger for those who send him. He lived his master's spirit. Today, the nations have a calling and have a responsibility to lift the master's spirit. Who is the master? The master is Mashiach, but the master is Israel. I want to tell you something today as the nations. You have a responsibility today, number one, to be a trusty messenger. You know what it means in Hebrew? Trusty is the word ne'eman. That's where we get the word amen from. Amen. Adonai, Aleph, Mem, Melech, Nun, Ne'eman. The Lord is a faithful king. The very first question you have to ask yourself today, how faithful are you to Israel? How faithful are you to the Jewish people? And I want to challenge you today. If you say you are faithful to the Jewish people and faithful to Israel, you must be also faithful to Judaism. If you hold today a position that seeks to convert Jews, if you hold today a position that seeks to assimilate Jews, if you hold today a position that try to make Jews go away from Torah, if you hold today a position against the oral Torah, you are not faithful to the Jewish people. I want you to tell you today, do not seek to change the Jewish people. Choose today, as it says in Proverbs 25:13, Kmo Tzir Ne'eman. Lift their spirit. Lift the Jewish people's spirit. So number one, the category, the prerequisite that we all have to ask ourselves today, if we are to be this envoy, what is our level of faithfulness to the Jewish people? That is also our level of faithfulness to the Mashiach, because Israel and Mashiach are one. They are one entity. Then Metzudat Zion comes and says the following. It says there that they will have a special quality to them. It says, Vekumu, hu inyan lashon ziruz. The word kumu is a language of hastening. Brothers and sisters, I want to tell you that in the simplest way so that you will understand what I am telling you today. You have one calling. And your calling today is not to be complacent. If you want to be this envoy right now and you see what's happening to the world, don't go to their own affair. Yeshua says in the parable of Matthew chapter 22, when they received the invitation, they all went to their own affair, their own business. Don't do that. Be about the business of Israel. Be about the business of the Jewish people. And ultimately, be about the business of King Mashiach. This word kumu means that we have to move fast. We have to build Torah Center, Batei Midrash. We have to support Jewish causes. We have to stand for the land. We have to stand for Jerusalem. And we have to do it as this is the only cause in our life in the days ahead. Make it your cause today in those days and you will be faithful. And don't do it in order to convert the Jewish people. That's not what the faithful ones are doing. Steinsaltz, may his memory be blessed, explain it in such beauty and such a simplicity. And he simply says, messengers have already been sent to the head of the nations in secret or openly, saying, and I hope that you will write those words. This is the commission today of the Gentiles. Gather yourself against Edom. Come against it against Edom and arise to war against Edom. This is our calling today, brothers and sisters, to gather ourselves. If we are to be called the remnant that is coming out of the system of Christianity, although we can be Christians according to the flesh, Gentiles according to the flesh. Some people think Gentile is a bad term. But look at the Gentiles here. They're going to war. They're going to war for Israel. You don't have to prove your DNA. You don't have to prove your Jewishness. It's foolishness. God can use you today if you can be a loyal envoy in this last day who is never complacent. But we do today have to gather ourselves closer to the house of Israel, closer to the Jewish people. Wake ourselves up and come against it. Edom, and get ready to the war. And you know, war does not have to be a physical war. I don't believe that this text is speaking about a physical war, but rather against a spiritual war. In the book of the Fall of Edom, I wrote the following for all of you to take to heart today. This is a difficult message, especially for non-Jews to hear today, but you must hear it. Here is what I wrote in the Fall of Edom. The notion that all of Christianity represents Edom is difficult to digest. It's difficult to accept. And it can be very upsetting to so many Christians worldwide who love the God of Israel. As we will see in a moment, the Ramad speak of two different distinct Gentiles and two different churches, the apostate church and the grafted in nations. We must distinguish ourselves between the two groups. This is the key that we have to understand today. There is a separation, not just in the house of Israel. When Yeshua spoke in Matthew 25:32 of the sheep and the goats, I don't believe he just spoke about the Jews or about the Gentiles. I think he spoke about the entire world. This is going to be a separation of all of humanity. So if you're Christian, hey, you don't need to run and call yourself a Jew to fulfill this role of being the great envoy. But what you have to do is the things I discussed a few minutes ago. There is a distinguishing, there is a separation that is taking place. So Ovadiah the prophet and say it through the Holy Spirit. The question is, who is the one who notified? I do believe that this is the job that we, Jewish followers of Yeshua, have to do today. Help us. I also believe that this is something that Jewish people, if they're not too proud, like many in our Orthodox circles, they need to call to the heavens, and they also need to open the doors toward the non-Jews and say, help us. Fight with us. I do believe that this is a role of every Jew to do that today. And that's what we do. That's why I write the books like The Fall of Edom for you. To know that number one, we need your help. Number two, you need to choose a side while we have time. In The Fall of Edom, I wrote the following. Listen carefully. The Abarbanel was partially correct, just in part he was correct in his interpretation about Rome, as Edom represents the system of Rome closely aligned with Christianity. Yet the prophet clearly states that out of the system of Rome, a remnant will come out to fight with Jacob, shoulder to shoulder. Zephaniah chapter 3. In other words, there will be a remnant of Christians who fight against Rome and the spirit of Edom. How can Christians fight against Christianity? It is because the two are not the same. I want to say to all my Christians, brothers and sisters, who are today faithful, envoy, and seeking to learn, seeking to grow, not to seek to convert the Jews. but really seeking today to support the Jewish people, support the Messiah, support them at all costs. I'm asking you today to take it to heart. If you're not Jewish, separate yourself from the system of Christianity. This is your wake-up call. Look at the great fallout throughout Christianity in these last days. The fallout of leaders, the fallout of churches. Get away from the system. You can call yourself a Christian. There is nothing wrong with that, as long that you take upon yourself the rules of becoming this faithful envoy, tzir bagoyim. Although the Abarbanel understood that this speak about the physical place of Rome, the system of Christianity, the Radakam, and I do believe that both are correct. Both interpretations are correct. There is absolutely no problem in accepting both interpretations. But remember, they're getting up to a fight, to a war. The question against who? We already answered it. It's against Edom. But who is Edom? Listen to what the Radak is telling us about Edom. He says, in a quote, Edom is not a region or a country, but rather represent a spiritual force. I want you to read it with me again. A spiritual force that has Satan himself control. This is something that we have to understand. As Satan himself control it. Edom is not just a physical gathering of nation. It is, but it's something much more sinister, something much more serious that is standing behind it. It's a system that controlled by Satan. Does that mean that Christianity, I'm not talking about Christians, I'm talking about Christianity system controlled by Satan? I want to tell you something, that even the elect are going to be deceived in those last days. Don't put anything beyond Satan in those last days. Now we start to understand the purpose beyond the prophecy of Ovadiah. In the book, The Fall of Edom, chapter 1, verse 1, I wrote the following. Again, it's a system that's controlled by Satan. The Radak is correct. Listen to what I wrote in The Fall of Edom. The entire purpose of the book of Obadiah is to awaken. I want you to write it down. Is to awaken the remnant from within Edom to return and fight Edom with Israel and the Mashiach. The prophet understood that the remnant of Edom returning to Jacob was a new foundation to help win the final battle with the house of Israel. The mystery is that through the nation awakening, Rabbi Shaul spoke of the great mystery of the fullness of the Gentile, which is exactly the purpose of the book of Obadiah, to both warn the nation and to invite them at the same time. This is important that we see that and understand it. What Obadiah is prophesied here when he said, get up and fight. Get up and fight. He's speaking about what Paul called the fullness of the Gentiles. This is the fullness of the Gentile, which is the purpose. He prophesies of the words of Apostle Paul, of Rav Shaul. Very soon, my new book, The Jewish DNA of Romans 11, will be out, and you'll be able to read about this. Paul does not make up this out of nowhere. This is what Ovadiah is calling for. The awakening of the nations to fight against the demonic nations that will infect the entire world. The infection is great. We already see it among ourselves. Therefore, I write 2 slides forward. Today, every Christian must question which Jesus are they associated with. It's simple. The Jesus of Rome, Edom, or the Yeshua of Jacob? This question will be the most important question that a non-Jew will have to ask themselves in the last day. Who am I aligned with? The word that you have to ask yourself today, who are you aligned with? The prophet Ovadiah is telling us it's all about alignment. We either aligned with Jacob or we're going to be aligned with Rome, with the system of Rome. We either align with Rome or we're aligned with Yerushalayim. And before you jump up and down and say, oh, of course it's Jerusalem. But then you take upon yourself an anti-Jewish view. You reject the oral Torah. You reject the tradition of Israel. If you do those things and you reject Judaism, you align yourself with Rome. I'm telling all of you, come to our yeshiva, like Yeshivat Shuvu. Come and learn. You see, in Zechariah chapter 8, 23, we read about 10 Gentiles who will grab the tzitzit of the Jew. Who do you think the 10 Gentiles are? Those 10 Gentiles are the envoy that we are reading about here in the text, which is absolutely amazing. I bet most of you have not connected the dot of that, but that is exactly what it is. It's an envoy of Gentiles who are learning how to fight Hasatan by grabbing to the Jew, learning Torah, learning mitzvot, and through doing all of those things, while remaining Gentiles according to the flesh, they are becoming the deciding factor in winning the battle of these last days. Are you hearing what I'm telling you today? Every Christian has the potential to be this great envoy, but only few will become this remnant. Now remember what the text says. The text says that there will be tzir bagoim. Tzir bagoim is an important envoy among the nation. But there is a linguistic clue here in the text. Some people who are watching me right now believe in pre-trib rapture. Let me destroy this entire silly theological view. Remember what it says in the text. It says there will be tzir bagoim. The word tzir does not just mean envoy. There's another meaning of the word tzir that you must consider. The time that those Gentiles are being raised up. The time that those Gentiles becoming the secret force that come and fight and ultimately help us to fight and win the war against Satan himself. Listen what the Ramad said as I wrote this, translated him straight from the Fall of Edom to the Fall of Edom. He says, the word envoy or tzir is the same word for labor contraction or labor pain or birth pain, meaning deep anguish. And it's also related to the birth pangs of the coming of the Messiah. Incredible. The punishment are in the birth pangs. The prophet states, Kumu venakuma, arise and let us rise. As the two words repeat themselves to describe the double judgment that will come upon Edom. The judgment on the earth and the judgment of the Sarim in the heavenly court. It stated in Yirmiyahu, in Isaiah 24:21, in that day God will punish the hosts of heaven and the king of the earth. I don't know how much time I spent in explaining Isaiah 24:21, one of the most amazing verses. Understand this. Read the new Hamas. I explain it to you. It says here in the text, Kumu v'nakuma, the word, arise, arise. Speaking about the two judgments that are going to be taking place. But listen to this. When is the rising taking place of the nations? Look with me in the next slide for a moment. It says, Tzir bagoim. Tzir in Hebrew comes from the Hebrew word tzara. Tzarat Yaakov, Jacob trouble. The call to the nation is during Jacob trouble. Now be logical for a moment with me and understand it. If indeed the church has been raptured and they are no longer here, how can they get up to fight against Satan? The word Tzir Bagoim means that they will rise in the time of Jacob trouble, which means that the church has to go through the tribulation. Even the remnant church that line itself with Israel have to go through tribulation. It is clear to the expression Tzir Bagoim during the time of the Jacob's trouble. This is incredible prophecy, friends. And they say here in Hebrew, Kumu Venakuma, which tell us exactly who is behind all of this. You remember what Radak says? Radak says that the judgment will come upon the Sarim in the heaven and the nation on the earth. They are both together. A system and a master prince who control the system. What is his name? Look at the Hebrew of the word kumu venakuma. In Hebrew, the word kumu have the value of 152, and the word nakuma is 277. If you total them, you get the value of 359, which is the name of Satan. Satan is the ultimate impersonator of Edom and Esav. If you want to understand who we wrestle against right now, is Satan himself. The nations that are right now roaming and harassing Israel are just the messengers. They are delivery boys of Satan himself. Today we need everybody. And we need more than anything else the envoy of Gentiles to come and help Israel to fight this spiritual war. The Radak himself concludes and he says, the Gentile will tell each other about Edom. We have heard from God, as they will tell Goy to Goy, nation to nation. Let us go to war. How do we go to war today? We go to war by Torah. We learn Torah. We practice Torah. Because in the last days, Yeshua himself said that lawlessness will explode. Why? Because Satan is behind it. We have to go to a spiritual offensive war today against Satan. And I mean, take no prisoner. When I mean go to war, I mean go to war. Fight it. With our holiness, with our kedusha, we are good gidid, with our mitzvot, we are Torah practice, by loving our neighbors ourselves, learning Torah and practicing it. The envoy is ready to learn Torah today, to fight Satan himself. Matter of fact, the word that is used here in the text, last word for you this evening, is the word nakuma. Look at the root of the word nakuma. Remove the vav, which is a sword, and you have the word nekama, which is revenge. They say, let us arise to revenge. The remnant among the nations will say to each other, let us arise and take revenge upon the nations and upon Satan himself. Verse 1 of Ovadiah is giving us today a challenge. Are you really ready to take revenge against Satan for the sake of Israel? Israel cannot win without this envoy. That is the mystery of the gospel. That's why Paul says that the fullness of the Gentiles have to come before the fullness of the Jews. That's what's happening in verse 1. The fullness of the Gentiles is coming. So I'm telling all of you today, everybody, kumu venakuma, let us fight against Satan himself. Let us join ourselves to the house of Israel. When you join yourself to the house of Israel, through the spirit of Yeshua, and you do not reject Judaism, you're bringing weapon, the greatest weapon of Mashiach ben Yosef to the Jewish people. I urge you today, read this book, verse 1. Most importantly, as you read it, say to yourself and say to your neighbors, Kumu v'nakuma, let us arise. Understand, we are already in the time of Tzarat Yaakov. We are already in the time of Jacob trouble. We are in this time. But now, we have to go to work. Awaken today and become this remnant Gentiles, remnant church that is joining themselves to the house of Israel. I'm going to see you next time for verse 2. God bless you, and please share these important teachings and read the books. Shalom, everybody.